Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I'm your host, Marie Hutchison, and today's guest is reshaping how we think about leadership, not through more strategy, but through deeper clarity and mindset mastery. Farah Ragheb is the strategist and mindset partner behind the Simplified Model, a framework that's guiding founders, executives, and investors across 22 markets. Her approach blends high-level strategic thinking with powerful inner work, helping today's leaders navigate complexity, avoid burnout, and build businesses with purpose and resilience. Farah is on a mission to make mindset the competitive edge for legacy-driven leadership. Farah, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So let's start with your background. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you ended up in the UAE?
I primarily grew up in Canada and I spent a lot of my time there. And then as I got older, I wanted to explore the world and see what perspectives in ways of living and working and being are out there. And when I was 25, I set off to go to Barcelona to study my MBA. And then shortly after that, when I graduated, I was looking for that next full-time job. And I ended up landing a job in the Middle East with Topshop and Topman. What was really exciting about that role was that I was able to then be able to manage the majority of the Middle East, so including the Emirates. And I actually ended up getting a role with Topshop and Topman, leading the launch of these brands across the Middle East region. So I ended up in the Emirates and doing a lot of work in Dubai by opening up all the shops and stores there for these major brands, which was really a lot of fun.
I can imagine. So you've had hands-on experience working with brands in the Middle East. Let's talk a little bit about the Simplified Model. How does that work and what makes it different from traditional leadership frameworks?
So over the last 20 years, majority of my career working across different markets in the world. So currently I'm based in Copenhagen, Denmark, but prior I was based in Hong Kong. Before that I was in the Middle East. Before that I was in Europe and then Canada and the US. And so in my time of working with leaders across some of the world's not only top organizations, but also mid-sized companies and startups, what came to be the red thread that I consistently noticed was what differentiated a leader from being successful versus the one that wasn't really came down to the mindset. You have organizations or companies or brands that have all the money, have the best teams, and really have all the resources to be a very successful company, but they would fail or they would go under. And the reason that I consistently saw was, or largely influenced by the mindset of the leader. And that's how I came into the realm of better understanding how the mind of a leader works and how to bring it into the workspace in a way that can actually create legacies and not only success for that leader and their brand on a professional level, but on a personal level as well.
That's amazing. So the difference between success and failure comes down to mindset. I know you've said that today's leaders are over-strategized and under-equipped in mindset. What do you mean by that?
It's a little bit conventional that we're focusing always on the strategy and our goals and our next moves. And we do that year on year. And what we are not really focusing on are the people. How do we put humans first? How do we understand how the way that we lead can generate more success? Because we're also in this era of just speed and moving things at a fast pace. And it's not really working because in parallel, you also have this rise of stress and burnout and overwhelm. And a lot of the leaders that you speak to today, the word overwhelm or stress, no matter what company they're working on, doesn't seem to be too far from them. And so when you think about that in its simplest form, and you look at a leader that loves their job, loves that what they do, is motivated, yet at the same time feels stressed, doesn't feel like they have time for their family or doing things that they love, they often feel overwhelmed. That is not the baseline for leadership that creates long-term success, that creates legacy. But when you're looking instead at a leader that feels fulfilled in themselves, feel grounded, feels calm, and feels clear, instantly you can feel the energy of that leader to be quite different. And therefore, leading from that space towards success obviously will be a different journey.
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned burnout, and with burnout being so prevalent, what are some of the signs that even high-performing leaders may be on the edge of burnout?
That's a great question, because the tricky thing about burnout is that many leaders who are experiencing it for the first time don't even know it's happening. They often say, like, your body will whisper at you before it yells at you. And there will be subtle signs. So, for example, in the array of leaders that we work with that have gone through that, it's really these subtle signs of, for example, not having a strong memory. You're just forgetting things really easily. Sometimes feeling like they're losing their voice or stuttering, feeling like they're constantly in fight or flight mode. And I know that when I experienced a burnout several years ago, I was putting the salt in the fridge and the milk in the cupboard. So mixing things up in a way that I wasn't even conscious of until I went back to look for the milk or the salt. That was an interesting experience, because when I went to see my doctor and she said, "You're quite stressed." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I feel great." And she's like, "No, no, you're actually quite stressed. That's why you're having these symptoms." And I just said, "No, but I feel great." And so even when it's showing you its signs, if you haven't experienced it, you won't be able to recognize it until afterwards. And so now what you can do to have some awareness about it is just take a deep breath and check in with yourself and say, okay, do I feel I can't remember things as well? Do I feel like I'm mixing things up and can't keep things in order? And just really checking in with ourselves to see how we really feel. And the importance of that is because our pride or our ego or what we're used to doesn't think that, it almost feels like burnout is something shameful versus something that is just telling you, hey, your body's tired. Maybe just slow down or take a break. It doesn't really mean anything more than that, in essence.
That is so interesting. I like how you said your body will whisper at you before it shouts at you. And I think, wow, these signs that you speak of, forgetting things, losing your voice, or not feeling like you can express yourself, or stuttering, that constant fight and flight mode, I think lots of people will resonate with these signs. But as you say, it's difficult to recognize them. And I like what you said about having to take a deep breath and check in with yourself, because our egos really don't want us to accept that we have limits. I think that recognition that we do have physical limits, that as much as we want to do everything, there comes a time we simply cannot do it all. As you mentioned earlier, you've worked across 22 global markets. What universal mindset challenges do you see in leaders, regardless of culture or industry?
I would say that working across these 22 markets and working across different cultures, whether it's the Middle East or Asia or Scandinavian or European or what it may be, something that really comes up is the conventional idea of what leadership should be. Conventionally, a leader has to have all the answers. Conventionally, the leader always has to have it all together. They have to be able to always see 5 steps ahead. They have to be the ones to always give direction and really be like the boss, quote unquote, in those conventional ways, and never to show any signs of weakness or vulnerability. But in essence, some of the greatest leaders are just very human. And I remember this being quite prevalent when I was searching for roles in my younger years across major corporations. When I would reach out to, let's say, directors and managers, I would be met with a lot of ego. I would be met with a lot of, sorry, we're not hiring. Nope, overqualified. There's no room here, without even a room for discussion. And then what I decided to do is go one step higher and speak to CEOs and VPs and presidents instead of those organizations. And what struck me through that and was really game changing for me is they would say, great, let's have a coffee and try to understand what kind of skills you have. Or they would say, oh, that sounds lovely. Why don't we have a quick call and just have a discussion about it? The universal pattern, I would say, is that the conventional definition of leadership is quite rigid, whereas actual successful leadership is just a lot more human. Someone that's not afraid to have a conversation, to open the door, not to gatekeep, and to really just be vulnerable with you and just be human about it.
That's really interesting. For those that were willing to open the door, willing to have that cup of coffee, willing to be human, was their approach different to those who would not even give you the time of day?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a vast difference in emotion that you feel in those interactions. It was very rigid and almost like pushback, whereas the other was just very welcoming. It was like hanging out with a friend you've known for years. That's why it became something that was so noticeable for me, because you really are welcomed by a complete stranger that probably doesn't even have time, because they're at the helm of these great companies, to say, hey, yeah, this could be interesting. Let's have a cup of coffee or let's have a phone call and let's just explore what we can do for you. Or actually, let me just connect you with someone I might know that can take this conversation better. Whereas at the other side, and you see this a lot in what you call like the corporate jungle, right? There's just a lot of fear. And I think that is what comes down to the difference here. One leader is operating for fear, like, will I lose my job? Do I even have time for this? I need to perform. I need to show up. The word I is very prevalent. But in real leadership, there's no I, there's always we. And that's also something that you can catch in the way that people speak about leadership. Those that say I, it's a different path than those who are always saying we and us and together. And so you definitely can feel that difference in that.
How interesting that it's that fear of losing something or that fear of having to perform for themselves and becoming sort of being very I focused versus the ones who are more open, more we focused. Very interesting. You are on a mission to make mindset the new competitive edge. Can you tell us more about that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why I believe that mindset and the inner game are quite important is because at the end of the day, you show up and you live and you lead as you are. It's not really always about the environment that's around you. And so, if you're holding certain beliefs or limitations or fears, let's say, for example, that you don't trust anybody, maybe something has happened along the way and you feel, I don't trust anybody. Or maybe you have this self concept that you're a bad communicator. How do you think that's going to show up in the way that you not only lead in an organization, whether you're a leader or an employee, but also you bring that into your personal life? It comes into your relationships, into your home life. And so, with what we do with the simplified model, is that we focus first on understanding what is the mapping of your own inner game and your unique mindset. What is happening there? From most leaders don't really know, where do they lead from, what drives them, what fuels their decision making. Is it coming from a place of clarity? Is it coming from a place of confidence? Is it coming from a place of fear? So it can be quite chaotic to operate in that way. And that is why we have such a rise of stress and overwhelm and burnout, because the internal world is chaotic. By helping us to understand our unique inner mapping in more depth, we start to see, okay, now I can get an understanding of what my own leadership style is. Maybe I thought I was a visionary, but I'm actually a problem solver. Then I can also see how mature am I in leadership. And I think this one is a powerful one, because often you can be a great leader with all the capabilities of being a great leader. But when things go wrong or when you're hit against challenges, the way that you handle them can be very immature. And so when we say immature, what does that mean? It means that you get defensive, the ego gets in the way, there's no accountability, you start blaming, you start looking at worst case scenarios. Whereas the mature leader will say, okay, what is the next step? How can we solve this? How can we work on this together? The fear is not really present in a way that is dominating the situation. And so when you think about operating from an inner world and mindset that is clear and confident and knows themselves, versus one that is not so much that, the difference in how they show up will really be something that you can see and feel.
Yes, I can absolutely understand that. So you can actually see leaders, as you say, who's coming from a place of fear because they're sort of more closed, more trying to control the outcomes of things, trying to control everything. Whereas those who come from that mindset of clarity, they're more open. The ego is not driving everything, so they're more collaborative, more open to other people's insights, which then ends up resulting in a better outcome. Let's unpack this for our audience. Practically, how does this work? Do you have one-on-one sessions with leaders? Do you have group sessions? How exactly do you help leaders with that mapping and then how to get that clarity and that confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to touch on something you said about having control. Having control is really an important word to highlight there, because when you have all that fear, it's because you want to control everything. But when you let go and you have a bit of surrender space, life give you what it wants, then you also move out of that space. And it can be very difficult for many leaders. But going back to your question, in a practical sense, I'm usually working with leaders on a one-to-one basis, and that's because majority of my clients are either executives or C-levels or investors at high-profile jobs. So it really has to fit into their agenda, and they need that one-to-one attention. And normally we're working together on a 3 to 6 month journey because, let's face it, transformation doesn't come overnight. It's something that you really have to work on and really have to show up for, but we keep it simple. What we do in the first 2 to 3 sessions is that we really work on giving that leader insight into what their current state of mindset and inner game is. And I do that through a series of assessments. One is the behavioral assessment, the other one is the inner game assessment. Some of that is through practical assessments, such as a questionnaire or a survey. And the other is more conversational, where I will sit with a leader and have a series of questions for them that will help me understand the foundation of where they are. We do not do any personality tests or anything like that, because this is not what this is about. What this is about is getting insight into the way that you move, the way that you make decisions, the way that you really just live your life, both professionally and personally. And so when we have an initial look at that, we can say, okay, these are your strengths. These are your hidden gifts that you don't even know about. These are things that you're doing that are sabotaging your success. And these are the areas that we need to develop, because if we don't, basically what you will do is you will stand in your own way of achieving that success. And then from there, we make a leadership development plan. And of course, there's the beautiful facet of accountability, which is a beautiful thing. So we meet on a bi-weekly basis. We're working on these plans together. We're developing, we're growing. Quite often, you can see a shift within like the first, let's say even 20 to 30 days. You can start just seeing the spark in their eye of like, wow, this really, I know I do that when things don't go wrong. Oh, I really feel like I have this one fear or limitation that is holding me back. And it's coming up not just at work, but at home as well. And then from there, you deepen the awareness, you challenge the mental models that they hold, and you develop from there.
It's an amazing thing that you're offering them, to have that one-on-one personal time to really dig down deep to see what is it that's actually holding them back, because that, even a mindset shift, can make such a big difference in the outcomes for the way they lead, for their own clarity.
You're really right about that, because sometimes even like a micro shift, even just a perspective. I was sitting with a client the other day, and the perspective we talked about was something so simple. And she said, Farah, that was a catalyst for me. And so sometimes you don't know where the nuggets of gems will come out of these insights and these transformations. One small micro shift can really be something that just changes the game for a leader. I love watching that.
Now, I know that it takes you months to work with people to make that change and to make the mindset shift. To make it practical for our audience, we know that many founders operate in high stakes, fast paced environments. What's one practical tool or mindset shift that they can adopt to avoid being reactive?
I love that question. And then I would just say we have our 733. And 733 is our well-being ratio that we've developed for leaders. A lot of our leaders use it on a daily basis. Some of them are now on a 6-month streak because they feel that they're consistently better with it. And what 733 is that every morning before you start your day, you spend 7 minutes in silence. And that just means that before you grab your phone, before you do anything and go into your automatic thought modality, you take 7 minutes, you sit in silence. You either focus on the sound of your breath, you focus on the sound of silence, or you just focus on your heartbeat. Whatever just keeps you in an empty space. Usually what those 7 minutes will do is it will give you a moment just to digress your day and to help you understand, what do I really want to focus on today? What's important and what's not? Then you follow that by 3 minutes of thankfulness, which means that in your mind, you are listing all the things that you are thankful for. It can be something as simple for, I'm grateful for eyebrows and eyelashes. I'm grateful that I can see and hear and touch and feel. I'm grateful that I woke up in a warm bed today. And what that does is that it rewires our energy in our brain to be able to see just how much abundance we have in our life and how much good things we have to be grateful for. Otherwise, our mind, if it's inclined to focus on what we don't have, will automatically go there day after day, and that compounds. And then in the last 3 minutes, it's visualization. And visualization, we can use that to either visualize us achieving a certain milestone, being calm at a certain event or occasion, or simply visualizing something that we would like to achieve. And so every morning, founders that are, running fast and moving at the speed every day, if they can start their day with 733, it will not only bring more calm and clarity into their day, but they'll actually start to feel a lot more grounded. And then over time, what we want to do is actually debunk this conventional saying that just because you're a startup, just because you're building, it has to move fast. Because it's actually when you go slow that you actually develop real success.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing the 733. I think it's such a practical thing that anybody can implement in their daily lives without needing to have a full coach. I can appreciate that we can all do this. It makes sense. If we force ourselves to slow down, to have those 7 minutes of silence, to have the 3 minutes of gratitude, and then the 3 minutes of visualization. And as you say, you don't need to go fast to be successful. You've hosted fireside chats at major summits and advised global brands. What's one powerful leadership insight that consistently resonates with your audiences?
I would say that one of the most powerful insights that we bring to the table that really resonates is one that addresses, I would say it's about the power of slowing down. Surprisingly, because a lot of the leaders that we work with, as successful as they are, or even if they're just starting their journey, there is always this baseline of just overwhelm and maybe insecurity and imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome comes out a lot. And the thing with imposter syndrome, at least from my perspective, is that it doesn't exist. Because if you are where you are, if you enter a room, if you're at a role at a company, if you're at the helm of a company that you've just started, you're meant to be there. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. There's always a reason of why you are where you are. And when you fall into imposter syndrome, you're doubting that even though you're in it. So it doesn't math when you think about it that way. So that's one, debunking imposter syndrome. And then two would really be the value of slowing down in order to speed up. Because we are living in a world where it's like, let's go bigger, let's go faster. Now there's AI, there's just so many things that are making us, want to move fast. But why do we have to move faster? Why do we have to go bigger? Especially if in parallel, the data is showing us that it's not working because people are stressed and burnt out and overwhelmed and tired and they feel unfulfilled. So if we slow down, not only can we take a moment to think about what we want for ourselves, no matter what that looks like. Maybe success means that you're living on a farm and gardening flowers all day. That is success. Or maybe success is really being at the helm of an entire empire that you're growing. And so when you slow down, you give yourself that time to reflect and that time to really understand, what do you personally want? Everyone's opinion, everyone's expectations, all conventional models aside, what do you want? What makes you feel joyful and what brings you fulfillment? And that empowers people to think, hey, I can really change the game and I could think for myself. So I think it's really powerful to bring this essence of slowing down where everything else tells you to speed up.
I like that very much. So that slowing down gives us that clarity, because anyone that's under pressure or tired or burnt out cannot think clearly. So then it's hard to see the next steps. Whereas if you can just slow down, you can then really see where you're at and see what is the next thing to do. I like that. You touched on imposter syndrome. I like how you said it doesn't exist. What advice would you give to emerging leaders or founders who feel like they do have imposter syndrome?
Well, the way that the mind works is that you can only focus on one thing at a time. You cannot focus on two things at a time. And this is the power of understanding our mind. When we understand the nature of our mind, we can play in our mind. If I know that I cannot focus or think about two things at the same time, and I have this thought that comes up that says, I can't do this, I'm doubting myself, do I really deserve to be here? I don't have the confidence to make this happen, or whatever nature the imposter thought arises in that moment, you can check yourself and say, who's saying that? Do I really believe that? Do I really believe that I don't have the confidence to be here? Do I really truly believe that I can't do this? Most of the time, your answer will be no. Of course I can do this. Of course I can show up in this space. And imposter syndrome shows up when we believe that we're not where we should be exactly, but where you are is where you need to be. And so a practical practice for that is when that thought arises, challenge it. Don't believe every thought you have. We have between 12,000 to over 65,000 thoughts a day. Majority of them are the same thoughts as yesterday. A percentage of that are thoughts that aren't serving you. And so sometimes we ask a room, how many people had a good thought about themselves today? And it will almost never be as many as when I ask, how many have had a bad thought about yourselves? So it's really about viewing your mind like a garden. Do you want a rose garden or do you want a garden full of weeds? And so when that imposter syndrome thought comes up, or any thought that makes you feel like you're not good enough or you're not valuable enough to be where you are, you just pick that weed out of your garden and throw it out, because you don't need to do anything or be anything or have any level of success to feel valuable. Human beings, we're valuable just as we are. The fact that you're here and that you're breathing and that you're present, that's the value. Your value is just being here. Everything else is just play. It's just playing with life and playing with the gifts of what your path is giving you.
It is so true that we as humans, I think it's a human thing, that we have more negative thoughts than positive thoughts, especially about ourselves. And the way we speak to ourselves is a lot worse than we would ever speak to anybody else. So I think that awareness is key, as you say, to be intentional when those thoughts come up, to challenge the thought, because we are where we are for a very good reason and for the right reason. So when those negative thoughts come up, that we challenge them and debunk them for ourselves so that we can possibly think about them less and be convinced in our own mind that we are where we are for a good reason.
Yeah, 100%. It's like a muscle. You got to keep working on that. And if you keep letting the imposter thoughts and the negative thoughts and the thoughts that are bad about yourself dominate, it does create friction in your life, internally, externally. And that is why it is so important to really nurture and understand your mindset and your inner game, because ultimately how you are inside is what reflects on the outside. And people, when they see you, they see what you are energetically, in a sense. And it really is a game changer to tune that in a way that if you have bad thoughts about yourself, don't let it be something that you believe or that you start to debate with or you start to give more presence in your space, because it compounds over time. If you think 2 years of that thought, 3 years of that thought, 4 years of that thought, it really can take a toll on your health as well. And it just robs you from the joy of life, really.
I just, while you were talking, thought, we are so hard on ourselves. But the worst thing is when you have somebody who doesn't have your best interest at heart, who puts a negative thought into your subconscious by making some negative comment, which is not real, but they want to start focusing on that thought as if it's real. And then we suck it up and we go, wow, yeah, he's right or she's right. This is true. I'm not bad. I'm not this, I'm not that. And because once you put that thought in and we allow that thought to grow, well, that's what's going to just stay in our minds rather than saying, wait a minute, challenge the thought and say, no, I'm here because I belong here. I'm here in the right place at the right time. Am I sort of on the right path there?
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that because, so often we can feel offended or we can feel hurt by what someone has said to us or what comment they have made to us. But when you really think about it, if you zoom out and you have a look at that, we as human beings barely know ourselves. Majority of us, we know ourselves, but each human is so complex and so deep. And so with us being in ourselves and still having a lot to learn about ourselves, when someone outside of us that doesn't really know us, just has a perception about us, comes and makes these comments or plants these thought seeds in you, it's just so important then to be grounded and confident in yourself to know that actually this comment, if it is negative, says more about that person than it says about me. Because anybody with an inner world and an inner mind that is solid and grounded and calm will not even say something like that to somebody, even if they feel that it's true. Do you see what I'm saying? So it is really the quality of the internal world that translates outward from those conversations.
Absolutely. I love how you said it speaks more about them than about you, because somebody who's grounded with clarity would never put negative thoughts into somebody else. Really interesting.
Yeah, because you would always see someone as where they are. If somebody's in development, if someone still needs time to learn, if someone is at maybe a crossroads, it's compassion. And this, of course, goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of our dialogue, the middle tier managers versus the CEOs and VPs. One sees, okay, there could be progress, there could be potential. I see them for where they are, not how I want them to be, not how I expect them to be. So one is like projection and the other is just human. And that's the difference there.
Absolutely. So fascinating and so true. So what's next for you and the Simplified Model? Any exciting markets or partnerships happening?
Oh, the Simplified Model, I think we're always having a great time. And I think it's primarily because of all the amazing people that we get to meet along the way. And we try to keep it simple and try to see what the year offers us as we go. And for 2026, it's really about just spending more time with our network, more time with our community. We have our partnerships with Soho House where we do our talks and workshops every month, which is great. We're doing a series of talks across London as well and looking at going a little bit into the London market. And of course, just really being open to seeing what the journey brings and to see how we're inspired to grow as we go.
Excellent. I love what you're doing. I love that you're helping leaders with this mindset shift. I think it is so important, and it's changing lives and it's changing companies, because when a CEO has that clarity, has the right mindset, then the whole company benefits, and then you have a better chance of success than failure. So that impacts everybody within the organization. So it is excellent work.
And I was saying thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Excellent. Now we've come to the segment of our show where I will ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Strategy or clarity, if you had to pick one?
Clarity.
A book that changed how you think?
The Quran.
One word that describes your leadership philosophy?
Human.
What does legacy mean to you?
Impact that ripples through generations.
And what is one thing that you do each day, no matter how busy you are?
I pray.
Lovely. Well, thank you for playing along. That was easy enough. Now, I would like to ask you our signature Green Pill question. Could you share an inspiring or life-changing experience that you have gone through, your Green Pill moment?
My green pill moment definitely happened when I was working in Hong Kong. At that time, I had always had a string of full-time jobs. So my life was very corporate at the time. And I remember going to the office and seeing my director feeling quite sad. And I said, "What's up?" And she said, "The company's going redundant and we're all losing our jobs." And I thought, wow, like it's quite a blow to live somewhere abroad, be reliant on your salary, reliant on your job to uphold you. And suddenly one day, it's just gone. And I remember going home that day and thinking to myself, okay, what do I do? Rent is due. I have financial obligations. I had just started a brand at the same time in parallel. And over the course of the next year and a half, rather than choosing at that very moment to just do the automatic fear-based action, which is make a new CV, start applying to new jobs, I decided to see if I can make it on my own and not go back to a full-time job. What I learned after that is that life will test you and life will put you in different scenarios and different actions. But what I've learned is that when you trust and you trust in something greater than yourself, somehow it always works out, and it almost always works out right at the last minute when you're about to feel like it's hopeless. That's been a green pill moment for me because it has liberated me. It has shown me that I can really always manage to make anything happen, and not from myself, but rather through the trust in something greater. And that's always been deeply valuable for me ever since. And it's just knowing that no matter how hard things get, no matter how things go, whether things are successful or not successful on how people see them, there's always going to be something that happens that just is so breathtaking and so stunning that shows you it's all okay. And I think that just made life extremely beautiful for me.
Wow, I love that you shared that story. And as you say, no matter how difficult things get, no matter what comes up, at the end of the day, there's going to be something positive that comes out of that. Excellent. Farah, thank you so much for joining me today. Your approach to leadership, blending mindset, strategy, and meaning, is exactly what so many founders and executives need in today's fast-moving world. I love how we spoke about slowing things down, which helps us then with more clarity. You're helping leaders not to just build businesses, but to build legacies. Before we close, where can our listeners learn more about the Simplified Model or connect with you?
They can learn more at our website, thesimplifiedmodel.com. And we have something called the Simplified Leaders Alliance, which is our internal network of leaders. And the entry into that lead network is less about how much capital leaders are making, whether they're investors or founders or executives, but more about bringing together a circle of leaders that want to grow at the mindset level and inner game level as well, and then just see and enjoy how that translates into outer world success. So our website, our Instagram, our LinkedIn, we can stay connected across all those channels.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Matrix Green Pill podcast. If this conversation sparked something in you, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us reach more change makers like you. Until next time, take time to take a deep breath and check in with yourself.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.